It felt like a whole new life had started, but not one I'd asked for, not really. Before Mom met Gary, it was just us. Me and Mom, against the world, sort of. Dad left ages ago, a blurry memory of arguments and slammed doors. We managed, though. We had our routines, our little jokes, pizza on Fridays, bad TV we both secretly loved. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, I reckon, but it was ours. Then Gary came along, all smiles and promises. Mom was so happy, happier than I'd seen her in years. It made me feel a bit pushed out, if I'm being honest, like my place wasn't quite so certain anymore. Mom married Gary last spring. The wedding was a small do, not like those massive things you see on telly. She wore a blue dress, not white, and looked beautiful. Gary seemed okay, I guess. He was a builder, always had dirt under his fingernails, but he tried to be friendly. He'd ask about school and stuff, but it always felt a bit forced, like he was reading from a script titled, How to Talk to Your New Stepdaughter. I wanted to like him for Mom's sake. I really did. I tried to imagine us as a proper family, like the ones in the ads, all beaming at each other over a roast chick. At first, things were all right. Gary moved into our little house, which suddenly felt even smaller. He brought his big telly and his even bigger toolbox. He tried to be helpful, fixing leaky taps and squeaky doors. Mom was always fussing over him, making his favorite dinners, laughing at his jokes. I mostly kept to my room, trying to give them space. It was strange, hearing a man's voice booming through the house again. Sometimes I'd catch Mom looking at me with a hopeful expression, wanting me to join in, to be part of this new setup. I'd smile, but inside, a little knot of worry was already starting to form. Though I couldn't quite say why back then. He'd call me mate or kiddo, which felt a bit off. My real dad never called me those things. Gary tried to get involved in my homework, even though he wasn't much good at algebra. He'd sit too close, his arms sometimes brushing mine. I'd tell myself it was nothing, just him trying to be a dad, but it made my skin crawl, just a tiny bit. Mom would beam, saying, "Isn't Gary great, love? He's so good with you." I'd just nod, feeling like a traitor for the weird feeling in my tummy. I didn't want to spoil her happiness, not for anything in the whole wide world. Gary started spending more time with me, especially when Mom was working late at the supermarket. He'd say he was keeping me company, making sure I wasn't lonely. At first, it was just watching movies together in the lounge room. He'd let me pick, which was a change. But then he started suggesting things like playing video games in his den, or him helping me with my art projects, which he knew I loved. He'd praise my drawings a lot, saying I was really talented. It made me feel a bit special, I suppose, because no one had ever paid that much attention to my art before. Not really. The way he looked at me started to change. Or maybe I just started noticing it more. It wasn't like how a dad looks at his daughter. It was different. His eyes would linger a bit too long. He'd find excuses to touch me. A hand on my shoulder that stayed there. A pat on my back that slid a bit too low. He started buying me little gifts, nothing big, just chocolates or a cheap necklace. Our little secret, he'd wink, and my stomach would flip over. I told myself I was being silly, overthinking things. He was just being nice, wasn't he? Trying to bond. One afternoon, Mom was out shopping and he came into my room while I was doing my homework. He said he just wanted to chat. But then he sat on my bed right next to me. He started talking about his own childhood, how tough it was. He told me I was special, that I understood him in a way Mom didn't. He put his arm around me, and this time it wasn't a quick, friendly gesture. It was heavy, and it stayed there. I froze, my mind racing. What was happening? This wasn't right. This wasn't how stepdads were supposed to act. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. He started saying things like, "You're so mature for your age, love, and you're my favorite girl." He'd compliment my clothes or my hair in a way that made me feel incredibly self-conscious and exposed. The house, which used to be my safe place, started to feel like a trap. I'd try to avoid being alone with him, making excuses to go to my friend Chloe's house or staying late at the library. But he always seemed to find a way. The air in our home grew thick with unspoken things, with a tension only I seemed to feel, or at least only I seemed to be terrified by. My insides were a tangled mess of knots. Guilt was a big one. What if I'd done something to make him think this was okay? Had I smiled too much? Had I been too friendly? The questions looped in my head, day and night. Then there was the shame, hot and prickly, making me feel dirty. This was my secret, a horrible, heavy thing I had to carry around all by myself. I knew deep down that what was happening was wrong, so very wrong. But a tiny, awful part of me was confused by the attention, even though it scared me. It was like being lost in a fog with no clear path out. Fear became my shadow. I was scared of Gary, scared of what he might do next, what he might say. Every time he walked into a room, my heart would start hammering like a trapped bird. I was scared of being alone in the house with him. I'd listen for Mom's car, praying she'd come home early from work. Sleep became difficult. Nightmares often jolted me awake, leaving me trembling in the dark. The fear was a constant hum beneath the surface of everything, making ordinary things feel impossible. It was exhausting, living on edge all the time, waiting for something awful to happen. I felt so utterly alone, like I was adrift on a tiny raft in a huge, stormy ocean. Who could I tell? Mom seemed so happy with Gary. If I told her what would happen, would she believe me? Or would she get angry, accuse me of trying to break them up? The thought of shattering her happiness was unbearable. She'd been through so much already. And my friends, well, they were all worrying about boys they fancied, or what to wear to the school disco. How could I dump something this huge, this awful, on them? They wouldn't understand. They'd think I was weird, or worse, a liar. This secret started to poison everything. School became a blur. I couldn't concentrate on lessons. My marks started slipping. I stopped hanging out with Chloe as much because I couldn't pretend everything was normal. I felt like I was wearing a mask, smiling and nodding on the outside, while inside I was screaming. I was cut off, isolated in my own home, in my own head. The bright, chatty girl I used to be was fading away, replaced by someone quiet, watchful, and always, always afraid. It was a terrible, lonely way to live. Telling Mom felt impossible, absolutely impossible. She looked at Gary with such love in her eyes. He was her fresh start, her happy ending after Dad left. How could I be the one to smash that all to pieces? What if she chose him over me? The thought was a cold stone in my stomach. She'd call me sensitive, tell me I was imagining things, or making it all up to cause trouble. I could almost hear her voice, disappointed and hurt. No, telling Mom wasn't an option. Not yet, anyway. The risk felt too enormous. The potential fallout too devastating to even contemplate properly. And my mates, Chloe, Sarah, they were great, but this was way beyond crushes and arguments about pop stars. How could I explain the sick feeling I got when Gary was near? The way my skin crawled when he accidentally brushed against me. They'd stare, maybe whisper about me behind my back. Or worse, they'd try to give advice that wouldn't help, because they couldn't possibly understand the fear, the confusion. I imagined their faces, a mixture of shock and pity, and I just couldn't bear it. The shame was a wall, too high to climb, keeping me locked in with my awful secret. But then, last Tuesday, something shifted. Gary said something that made me feel smaller and more scared than ever before. I was sitting in my room, trying to read, and he just stood in the doorway watching me. And I realized, with a sudden terrifying clarity, that this couldn't go on. I couldn't live like this anymore. The fear was eating me alive. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and a different thought pushed through the panic. I had to tell someone who would listen, someone who could help. Mrs. Davison, my English teacher. She was kind, and she always seemed to really see me. The next day at school, my heart was thumping so hard I thought it would break right out of my chest. Walking to the staff room during lunch break felt like wading through treacle, but I did it. I found Mrs. Davison. I asked if I could talk to her, and the relief when she said, of course, love was immense. It's just the start, I know, but it's a start. Telling someone, anyone, is so important. If you're scared, if you're in trouble, please don't keep it a secret. Find a trusted adult. Talk to them. You're not alone, even when it feels like you are. There are people who want to help you.